Donald Trump didn't just give a strange or controversial speech at Davos this week. What he actually did was say something out loud that most politicians, even when they believe it, usually keep to themselves. You see, after an hour-long address at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, where he criticized European allies, pressured NATO, talked about acquiring Greenland again, and repeatedly mixed Greenland up with Iceland, Trump spoke to reporters and brought up the fact that people often accuse him of behaving like a dictator. And instead of rejecting that label, well, he leaned into it. He said, "But sometimes you need a dictator," and framed it as common sense rather than ideology. Now, the line matters here, not because it's particularly shocking, it's not even that surprising really, but because of where he said it and who he said it to. You see, Davos isn't a rally, it isn't cable news, it isn't Twitter. It's a closed room gathering of heads of state, central bankers, corporate executives, defense officials, and people who quietly make decisions that pretty much shape global trade, security, and investment in the world. Now, this is where the grown-ups of global power compare notes. And when something is said there, it isn't theater. In fact, it's signaling. And what Trump was signaling was that he genuinely believes democratic systems are inefficient, that institutions get in the way, and that there are moments when concentrated, unchecked power is preferable to process, debate, or accountability. Now, here's where the uncomfortable part is. He's not wrong about one thing. Dictatorships are efficient. They don't argue with themselves. They don't need consensus. They don't wait for court rulings. They don't compromise. They move quickly, decisively, and without resistance. That efficiency is seductive, especially when people feel like the system is slow, broken, and sometimes rigged. And what Trump is really saying is that he finds that appealing. He likes speed. He likes obedience. He likes outcomes without process. And if you think he's only talking about foreign policy, you're missing what he's actually saying here. He's talking about how he believes power should work in general. Now, in his worldview, elections are inconvenient, courts are obstacles, journalists are hostile, regulators are in the way of everything, and allies are freeloaders. Institutions aren't stabilizers, they're annoyances. They don't exist to protect the system, they exist to slow him down. So when he says sometimes you need a dictator, what he's really saying is that sometimes you need someone who doesn't have to ask for permission. And that is not a joke. That's a governing philosophy. Dictatorships don't start with tanks in the streets. They start with people getting frustrated with complexities in the system. They start when people say things like, "This takes too long," or "Nothing ever gets done here," or "We just need someone who can cut through the nonsense." Those complaints feel reasonable, they feel practicable, and they feel relatable. But Trump isn't selling tyranny here. He's selling efficiency. He's saying, look how slow this is. Look how messy this is. Wouldn't it be easier if one person could just decide? And a lot of people hear that and think quietly that he might actually be right. And that's kind of dangerous. Not the word dictator, but the logic actually behind it. And the reason this matters even more is because he didn't say this to Americans. He said it to the world, to countries that rely on U.S. security guarantees, to economies that depend on American stability, to institutions that operate on predictable rules. Then he followed it up by threatening Europe, mocking NATO, pressuring Denmark over Greenland, and implying that countries only exist because of U.S. generosity. This isn't leadership, that's leverage. He's telling the world that everything is personal, everything is negotiable, and everything depends on him. And that's not how stable systems are supposed to function. That's how protection rackets work. And when power becomes personal, it becomes transactional. When it becomes transactional, loyalty matters more than the law. And when loyalty matters more than the law, corruption stops being an exception and starts becoming the rule. That is not abstract theory here. That's how strongman systems actually operate. And Trump isn't accidentally drifting into this language. He's been conditioning people for years to accept it. First, he normalized the idea that elections might be fake, then that courts are corrupt, then that journalists are enemies, then that experts can't be trusted. Now he's normalizing the idea that democracy itself is optional. And he's doing it casually, not dramatically. And that's what should really be worrying people here. This was not a meltdown, this wasn't rage, this wasn't a tantrum. This was a calm statement of belief delivered to one of the most powerful audiences on the entire planet. The real question isn't whether he meant it, the real question is what happens if he gets to act on it. Because if you genuinely believe that sometimes you need a dictator, then by definition, you believe there are times when the Constitution should be ignored. You believe that there are times when courts should be overridden. You believe there are times when elections should be bypassed. You believe there are times when dissent should be silenced. That isn't interpretation, that's the logical endpoint of the idea. You cannot believe in dictatorship and still believe in democracy. Those things do not coexist. So this wasn't just a provocative soundbite. In fact, it was a confession. And the most dangerous part is that a lot of people didn't react to it at all, not because they agreed, but because it sounded familiar. It sounded like something they'd already heard before. It blended into the background noise of modern politics. That's how these things take root. Not through panic, but through repetition. This wasn't chaos, it was ideology stated plainly. And now that it's been said out loud, it doesn't really need to hide anymore, now does it? And that's what people should actually be paying attention to right now. I'm Hank, here to explain the chaos, not hype it. If you want clarity instead of noise, you're in the right place.